trope marketing is all the rage right now. And you know this if you've seen one of those book trope graphics, with the book cover in the center and then all the arrows pointing to different little, aspects of the book around it. Or you've seen those lists of tropes on book sales pages saying enemies to lovers or saying, forced proximity, etc. Tropes are everywhere. And they've kind of always been everywhere. Like it's just a matter of marketing copy, but more and more so over the last 4 or 5 years, they've really come to prominence as a way to sell books. Now, if you're not sure what a trope is, hopping back to Merriam-Webster, a trope is a common theme or device. It's a motif. So like the usual horror movie tropes, like the person walking down the dark alley and it's very dark and they keep walking even though there's sinister music and there's someone lurking in the shadows. Another example of a trope is the enemies to lovers trope, which is very common in romance. So a trope is similarly just a familiar motif, a familiar concept. If you do it a lot or it's overdone, it can get called a cliche. And in fact, people will say the difference between a trope and a cliche is that tropes are done well and cliches are done poorly. That's just the way it goes. And the thing is, naming the tropes in your book, listing them out, it works for book marketing. Our bite-sized short video culture loves them. Book tropes fit neatly into graphics and memes. They're an instant shorthand for communication. If you say, oh, I like enemies to lovers, and I like it with a cliffhanger ending, people go, oh yeah, okay, I get that. Tropes are also SEO friendly, and they're easy for algorithms to latch onto. So it kind of makes sense why they're just everywhere, and they continue to be everywhere because they really are serving a place in our culture and in our cultural mindset and where everything is. And in addition, a lot of fiction readers, not all of them, but a large amount, they read books for comfort. This can be especially true when life is overwhelming. And since we live in a world where info overload is just served up, you're always going to feel overwhelmed. And that's something else too, is I've often said, okay, well, things are overwhelming. So cozy is big. And then I kept going, wait, because of the devices we carry in our hands, giving us access to way too much information about everything in the world constantly, whenever we want it, because we can take the slightest idea we have and instantly Google it and come up with 20 different tabs and 30 different videos about that idea to research, we're constantly getting overloaded. I don't believe cozy fiction is going anywhere. I don't think that simplistic, more simple plotted fiction is going anywhere as long as we have these kind of devices of information overload constantly there. It doesn't even matter if you care about the political situation or not. You'll find something to be overstimulated by on your phone. There's so many options. There's so many things you can watch on Netflix or on other streaming services. And so tropes can offer a safe, easy way for readers to make their next choice. It creates simplicity out of the chaos. And so that's another reason why, while there's some issues with tropes and they can oversimplify things, I don't think they're going anywhere. As long as we have these devices of everything in our pockets, and as long as there's endless options for entertainment and information, people aren't going anywhere. Like tropes aren't going anywhere. Apologies, there was someone walking by with their radio going really loudly. This happens in my neighborhood. Anyway, as long as we live in overstimulated culture, tropes are here to stay because they simplify things. They offer a common language. Marketing likes them. They just fit. And the thing is, even in the business world, it's a no-brainer, so much that I regularly read about choosing your tropes before your plot as a piece of advice from writing experts. So don't think about the story. Don't think about the premise. Don't think about the problem or solution. Don't think about what you even like about the story. Just trope load from your desired genre, toss it in a blender, do the best you can, and hope for the best. The business world is really pragmatic, and so when it comes down to it, book sales, not creativity, are king. And that's a factor of that. And so also out there, if you've ever thought about your book sales as a business, but then went, ugh, and everyone's like, oh, well, maybe you don't like the money. No, it's a lot of times because business people, when it comes down to it, sales are king. And so they're all too ready to go, well, can you make yourself like this? Can you make yourself like that? And I'm like, at a certain point, writing a book is just too much work to do to write something you hate, guys. Like, anyway. Tropes make sense for business as well because of all of those other reasons. People like them, technology likes them, algorithms like them. They're here to stay. But there has been a major backlash against tropes in the reader and author community. People say that books are getting too cookie cutter. Readers want to know more about a book than just a bunch of shorthand, just a list of ingredients. It's kind of like, okay, here's your book and there's like flour and sugar and eggs. And you're like, well, that's great. But what's the book like? What does the book taste like? What is it meant to be? And there can also be a general fear that writing to tropes can limit the creativity of authors and doesn't let awesome, fresh ideas see the light of day because you're so obsessed with hitting your trope load that you don't get to think about those fun stories. And as you're listening to this or watching this, I want to hear your thoughts. Like, what do you think about that? Readers, do you think that things have gotten too overloaded? Do you think there's just too much trope stuff everywhere and we need some things that are more fresh? And as part of this whole backlash, listen to this title from an article in the Cornell Daily Sun. Popular tropes are the vile weed of storytelling. This article goes on to say that the use of monotonous tropes in the publishing industry is not a good trend because it is detrimental to both the craft of writing and the hobby of reading. Through tropes like these, books are reduced to marketing stunts, no longer the products of genuine artistic craft. And as consumers, we're not valuing the book as its core. Instead, we're valuing trends and superficial words. So it's not a book. It's not communication. It's just a marketing stunt. It's just a bunch of different things thrown into a blender and let's see what happens. And readers in another article on the bookseller mentioned the list of tropes can actually spoil things. And I want any readers who are listening to this, and I'm pretty sure you're all readers at this point, I want you to think about this. And I'm paraphrasing what they've said. If a book description lists an only one bed trope, then there's no surprise when that shows up. If the book description mentions enemies to lovers and there's two love interests, well, then the loyal childhood friend simply isn't going to be there. It's not going to be the winner. So it basically spoils the story. Unless it's a radical plot twist where the childhood friend turns into the enemy and then it's enemies to lovers. And that sounds like a lot of fun. So is there a book like that out there? I think that actually sounds like The Hunger Games a bit because Peeta is super loyal and then he gets his brain messed up. Spoilers, sorry. And then becomes the enemy and it's really horrible and it's wonderful. So that actually did do the enemies to lovers, but then it was friends to enemies to lovers to, anyway, you can definitely mess with these things. And I'm not here to argue that you should simply ignore tropes in your marketing. Even if you're breaking a trope, knowing the well-known trope that you're breaking can be a point of reference. And while I'm all for your artistic integrity and creativity, I also want you to use the tools you have to help you sell your books. So you have to find a happy medium there. You have to find something that works with your convictions. And I'm not telling you have to sell out all of your creativity and trope load, even if you want to sell your books and make a profit. You know me, I'm all about what makes sense for you, not about just doing something pragmatically. Because if you're going to approach your writing like you're just making widgets, then what's the point? Just make widgets. If you're going to take all the creativity out of it and make it into a widget machine where you're just, there's no personal creative process at all, then just get a job at a factory somewhere. Writing has an amazing ability to be creative. Let's keep that. So here are some paths you can take when approaching book tropes and using them in your marketing or not using them. So you can ignore book tropes and do what you want. You don't have to use book tropes in your marketing. You don't. It will take more time and effort to sell your books if you ignore book tropes and you ignore that kind of marketing. When experts use the easy sell word on their sales pages, when they're like, oh, I'm going to tell you the secret to easy sales, and I'm going to tell you the secret to books that fly off the shelf. one of their tricks is tropes. Okay, it just is. But if you're confident in your story and you know the readership that needs to hear it and you know they want it, then go ahead and do it. It'll take more educating of your audience. It'll take more effort. It will. But the thing is, even if you trope load something, there's no guarantee it's going to sell, because if you're too generic, then you can blend into everyone else anyway. So if you just want to ignore the tropes and do your thing, go ahead. Just understand that you do have to put in the work, and it will probably be a lot harder. You can also, option 2, load your stories with book tropes from the get-go. And remember, these tropes do need to be in your desired genre. So it does tie back to also reading in your genre and understanding what readers of that genre enjoy. And I recommend timeless tropes. So there can be trendy tropes, like right now, enemies to lovers is a very much a trendy trope, although I'm already seeing some backlash from people going, I'm getting really tired of everyone being cranky at each other, or are they really enemies? Anyway, you want to choose tropes that go back at least 10 years or more in popularity. So they have perennial popularity in your genre. And there was a thing on, I believe it was on TikTok, where they were actually tropifying, making trope graphics of classic literature and folklore. Now, that was seen as kind of icky, but there is a little bit of a validity in that in terms of books that have stood the test of time in different cultures, books that have shown up again and again are getting remade, and people are saying, oh, it's like this book only with unicorns and dragons and things. If that book has that level of perennial connection, then there's probably motifs in it that are timeless and that you can continue using your books now to keep them timeless. There's nothing worse than loading your backlist full of a lot of trendy tropes that no one really likes or gets anymore. And then that's your backlist. And if you know anything about book sales, that backlist is what really helps to keep up your profits. Like that people don't just read your current release, but go back and read all your other books. And so you want to make sure you're using some timeless tropes in there, things that have perennially been motifs that people have enjoyed. And of course, you can write to trend, but you have to write really fast. And it can really impact your backlist where it's full of trendy stuff that then doesn't really age well. Like if you've gone to a yard sale and seen a bunch of books from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and you're like, oh, what's this? Yeah, your book could be one of those. And so when you're not interested in creating that long tail, when you're not interested in creating that long brand, and you're just writing to trend really fast, your backlist can't do the work for you. So be careful about that, because then what you have to do is stay on a, treadmill of just writing and writing and writing. And that can lead to author burnout. So be careful about that. If you're just focused on the trope load and focused on the trends, make sure that you're doing stuff with timeless ideas. And also beware of doing trends too much, because it can impact your backlist. And if you're kind of in the middle where you're like, I want to use some tropes and I want to do that some in my marketing, but not everything, use tropes mindfully and know how your book is same and different from a trope. If your book contains a trope, then of course, use that in your marketing. Why not? And if your book flips or breaks a trope, then use that trope as a starting place for readers, but then switch it up. So instead of enemies to lovers, you could put enemies to, I have no idea, romance is weird, to let's just be allies, which is totally a thing I did in my steampunk book, Outlaw of Smoke, is that they ended up enemies, and then he tried to make a move, and she was like, I don't know, things are weird. I'm going to end up with this other guy. But she and the guy who made a move ended up being friends. Yeah, it's a bit spoilery, but it also kind of freshened that trope up. It took this idea of enemies to lovers, but kind of broke it open and went in a different direction with it. And just FYI, that book is steampunk adventure fantasy with a romantic subplot. If you're going to mess with romantic tropes, it can work better as a subplot. Some romance readers can get a little cranky if you mess with their tropes too much. They're kind of hardcore like that. But if you can mess with the subplot, that can work well. Or if you just own it and say, I don't care, I'm just going to flip this anyway and it's awesome, then that becomes part of your personal brand, and that can work. There are readers who want something different. You can become that author who is known for certain things that they do differently. So hopefully this encourages you as we're talking about book tropes here. It's complicated, it's messy, and the thing is, I do believe they are here to stay, at least in our current cultural climate. So you need to make peace with where you stand with tropes, whether you're going to have them be a major part of how you write books or be something where you write your book and then go, okay, that works as a trope, that works as a trope, or you're just going to ignore them completely, which you can absolutely do, especially with the advent of Kickstarter. You can chart your own path, and if you find an audience for that path, then you can use a Kickstarter. And again, lots of ifs here. Find an audience, do the work, connect with them. But if you find a little sub-niche audience there, then you can build your own personal brand based on just ignoring the tropes and serving that audience. That's totally legit, and it can help you connect your creative freedom and ideas with that audience if you just don't want to deal with any of this. But for those of us who are going to be using tropes are like salt to flavor your marketing. Don't make it 100% about the tropes. They can be a quick connecting point for readers, but make sure to bring things home with a solid book blurb, with an intriguing premise, pair it with a great book cover that you connect with your reader, and then also make sure your story itself is solid from beginning to end. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this live stream from Author Culture. I am Janina Polito, and I'm so excited that you're here. And make sure that you tune in next time for more tips, tricks, encouragement, and guidance for how to navigate life in the chaotic publishing world, plus plenty of geekiness. Your existence is awesome. And go forth and be awesome.